The cell was cold. It was always cold on Station Omega-9, but Unit KV-7821 had stopped noticing the temperature a long time ago. He sat on the metal floor with his back against the wall, watching the dying star through a cracked viewport. The red light made everything look like blood. They called him Keeper, not because anyone cared enough to give him a real name, but because his job for 47 cycles had been keeping cargo organized in the deep space warehouses of the Galactic Commerce Authority. He had counted boxes. He had moved containers. He had worked until his body started to break, and then he had worked some more. Now his left arm hung useless at his side. The crushing accident in Warehouse District 7 had happened 3 months ago. A loading crane had malfunctioned. 2,000 pounds of metal had fallen on him. He had screamed, but no one had come running. The other workers had simply stepped over him and continued their tasks. Eventually, a supervisor had dragged him to the medical bay. The authority doctor had looked at his arm for less than a minute. "Repair cost exceeds unit value," the doctor had said, typing something into a screen. "Recommend disposal." That was how Keeper had ended up here, on a station orbiting a star that was slowly dying. Station Omega-9 was not listed on any public map. The authority did not advertise what happened here. Thousands of workers like Keeper waited in cells throughout the station, sedated and silent, waiting for their scheduled termination. Keeper was not sedated. The drugs had stopped working on him years ago. His neural processors had developed resistance to most chemicals, a side effect of the cheap modifications the authority had installed when he was first created. So he sat awake while others slept, watching the red star and thinking about nothing. He was one of a species engineered specifically for labor. His creators had designed his people to be strong, obedient, and expendable. They stood 7 feet tall, with blue skin that could handle extreme temperatures. Their bones were dense enough to survive heavy impacts. Their lungs could process thin air. They were perfect workers. They were also perfect victims. Keeper did not remember being young. They were not given childhoods. They were grown in tanks, educated through neural downloads, and put to work as soon as their bodies matured. His first memory was carrying a box from one side of a warehouse to another. His second memory was carrying another box. His 10,000th memory was the same. Sometimes he wondered if there was supposed to be more to existence. He had seen other species laughing, talking, touching each other with affection. He had seen human crews on cargo ships, sharing meals and telling stories. He had watched from a distance, unable to understand what made them so different from him. The authority had taught him that he was property. He had no rights. He had no value beyond his labor. When his body failed, he would be disposed of, and a new unit would take his place. This was the natural order of things. This was how the galaxy worked. He had believed this for 47 cycles. He still believed it now, sitting in his cell, waiting to die. The termination schedule said he had 3 days left. The process was simple. They would take him to a room. They would inject him with a compound that would stop his heart. They would incinerate his body and recycle the ash for fertilizer. Nothing would be wasted. Nothing would be mourned. Keeper closed his eyes and tried to imagine what death would feel like. He hoped it would be like sleep, only permanent. He hoped there would be no dreams. A sound made him open his eyes. Something was moving in the ventilation shaft above his cell. He heard scraping, then a soft grunt, then the clatter of a grate being pushed aside. He watched with mild curiosity as a small figure dropped down from the ceiling and landed in the corridor outside his cell. It was a human child. Keeper had seen humans before, but always from a distance. Adult humans were common in spaceports, usually barking orders or negotiating prices. They were known throughout the galaxy for being loud, emotional, and unpredictable. Other species found them exhausting. The authority considered them a nuisance. But Keeper had never seen a human child. This one was tiny, barely reaching his knee. She had black hair that stuck up in odd directions, as if she had been crawling through tight spaces. Her clothes were dirty. Her face was smudged with grease, and she was looking at him with eyes that held no fear. "Hi," she said. Keeper did not know how to respond. No one had ever greeted him before. Workers did not greet each other. Supervisors did not greet their property. "Hi," he said finally. His voice was rough from lack of use. The child walked closer to his cell. An energy barrier separated them, crackling faintly with warning pulses. She pressed her face against it, ignoring the sparks that jumped toward her skin. "Why are you in there?" she asked. "I am waiting," Keeper said. "Waiting for what?" He considered lying. He considered saying nothing, but something about the child's directness made him want to tell the truth. "I am waiting to die," he said. "In 2 days, 17 hours." The child's face changed. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened and closed several times. Keeper recognized this expression from his limited observations of other species. It was called shock. "Why?" she demanded. "What did you do wrong?" "I did nothing wrong. I am simply broken." "Broken how?" Keeper lifted his crushed arm. The child stared at it. Then she stared at him. Then she did something he did not expect. She started to cry. Keeper had seen crying before. Injured workers sometimes cried before the supervisors told them to stop. But he had never seen someone cry for him. He had never imagined that anyone would. "That's not fair," the child said, wiping her face with dirty hands. "You can't kill someone just because they're broken. That's mean. That's wrong." "It is the way things are," Keeper said. "I am property of the authority. They have decided I have no value. The decision is final." "No, it isn't." The child reached through the energy barrier. Keeper watched in confusion as she pushed her small hand through the crackling field. It must have hurt. The barrier was designed to deliver warning shocks to anyone who touched it, but the child did not pull back. She pushed through until her fingers found his hand. Her grip was warm. Her skin was soft. She held on to him like he was something precious. She said. "What's your name?" "I am Unit KV7821. Designation Keeper." "That's a dumb name, but I like Keeper. It sounds like you take care of things." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm going to take care of you now, okay?" Keeper did not understand. He did not know what to say. He sat there in his cell, feeling the warmth of a child's hand, and for the first time in 47 cycles, he felt something crack open in his chest. It hurt. It felt like hope. And somewhere, in the dying light of a red star, a broken worker began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to existence than boxes and waiting rooms and scheduled death. Maybe there was this. Maybe there was a small hand, refusing to let go. Captain had been flying cargo ships for 20 years. He had survived engine failures, pirate attacks, and one very angry customs officer on a moon he preferred not to remember. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for raising a 7-year-old daughter in deep space. Was supposed to be on Earth with her grandmother. That had been the plan when his wife died 4 years ago. Would work the shipping routes, send money home, and visit whenever he could. His mother would raise in a proper house with proper schools and proper rules. The plan had lasted exactly 6 months. Had hidden in his cargo hold during his last visit home. He had not discovered her until they were 3 days into deep space, too far to turn back. His mother had cried over the communication screen, had yelled until his throat hurt, and had sat there with her arms crossed, refusing to apologize. "I want to be with you," she had said. "I don't care about proper, I care about you." That was 2 years ago. Now knew the ship better than most of his crew. She called the home. She called the 12 crew members her family, and she had developed a talent for finding places she was not supposed to be. Like Station Omega 9. The docking had been emergency only. Their water reclamation system had failed, and without repairs, everyone on board would die of dehydration within a week. Station Omega-9 was the only facility within range. Had not liked the look of it. The station was old and poorly maintained. The docking officer had been rude, and something about the place felt wrong, like a hospital that had forgotten its purpose. He had told to stay with the ship's engineer while he negotiated for parts, was supposed to watch her, was supposed to keep her safe. Had turned his back for 30 seconds. 30 seconds was all needed. Was in the middle of arguing about prices when his communicator buzzed with a security alert. A human child had been detected in a restricted area, holding cells. Cell Block 7. He ran. The station's corridors were confusing but did not slow down. He pushed past workers and dodged around cargo crates. His heart was pounding. His mind was racing. What were holding cells doing on a station like this? What was being held? He found Cell Block 7 after 10 minutes of running. The security door was open. 2 guards stood outside, looking uncertain. And there, sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of a cell, was his daughter. She was holding someone's hand through an energy barrier. Stopped, he looked at the figure in the cell. It was one of those engineered workers he sometimes saw loading cargo at major ports. This one was tall, even by standards, with blue skin and tired eyes. One of his arms was crushed and useless. He looked like he had not slept in weeks. Said carefully, "What are you doing?" "Helping," said without looking at him. "Helping who?" "Him. His name is Keeper. They're going to kill him in 2 days." Felt his stomach drop. He looked at the crushed arm, at the empty expression, at the energy barrier that hummed with quiet menace. "Kill him?" asked. "Why?" "Because he's broken," said. Her voice was thick with anger. "They say he's not worth fixing. They say he's trash, but he's not trash. He's a person. Look at him." Looked. Met his gaze. There was something in those eyes that recognized. It was the look of someone who had stopped hopping. It was the look of someone who had accepted a fate they did not deserve. "I apologize for the disturbance," they said. His voice was deep and rough. "Please take your child and go. I do not wish to cause you trouble." "See," said, "he's nice. He's worried about us even though they're going to kill him. That's not fair. That's not right." A new voice cut through the air. "Captain, you will remove your offspring from this area immediately." Turned. A tall insect-like creature had arrived with more guards. It was easily identified by its clicking mandibles and compound eyes. This one wore the uniform of a station administrator. "I am director," the creature said. "Your child has entered a restricted zone. This is a violation of docking protocols. I am prepared to overlook this incident if you leave now." "What is this place?" asked. "That is not your concern." "I'm making it my concern. What happens here? What are these cells?" His mandibles clicked with annoyance. "This is a decommissioning facility. Defective units are processed here. It is efficient. It is legal. It is none of your business." "Decommissioning," repeated. "You mean killing." "I mean disposal of non-functional property. The unit in that cell has been assessed. It cannot be repaired. It has no value. In 47 hours it will be terminated. This is standard procedure." Stood up, she was still holding Keeper's hand. "He's not in it. He's a he, and you can't just kill people because they're hurt." "It is not a person," said. "It is property. Now remove yourself or I will have security escort you." Looked at thee in the cell. He thought about his wife, who had died because a hospital decided her treatment was too expensive. He thought about his mother, who had worked in factories until her hands bled. He thought about all the people he had known who had been treated as less than human. "How much?" he asked. Santini twitched. "I beg your pardon." "You said he's property. Property can be sold. How much for him?" "Captain, this is absurd. The unit is scheduled for disposal. It is worthless." "Then selling it to me costs you nothing. Give me a price." The director stared at him with those compound eyes. The guards shifted nervously. The in the cell had gone very still, like he could not believe what he was hearing. 100 credits, said finally, and you will leave immediately. Pulled out his payment device. 100 credits was nothing. It was less than he spent on fuel in a week. It was the price of a broken laborer that no one wanted. He transferred the funds. "He's mine now," said, "drop the barrier." Made a sound that might have been disgust or might have been confusion, but he gestured to the guards, and the energy barrier flickered and died. Keeper did not move. He sat there on the cold floor, staring at like he was seeing something impossible. Pulled at his hand. "Come on, you're coming with us." "I do not understand," Keeper said slowly. "Why would you do this? I am broken, I am worthless, I am—" "Your family now," interrupted. "That's what says. When someone needs help, they become family. That's what humans do." Keeper looked at, nodded. "She's right," the captain said. "Welcome to the, we'll figure out the rest later." For a long moment, Keeper did not move. Then slowly he stood. He was massive, towering over both humans. His broken arm hung at his side. His blue skin was covered in old scars. But when he walked through the cell door, his steps were uncertain in a new way. Not the uncertainty of fear, but the uncertainty of hope. Took his hand again. "You can sit next to me on the ship. I'll show you everything. Do you like games? I have lots of games." Keeper did not know what games were. He did not know what family meant. He did not understand why these humans had spent money on someone the galaxy had thrown away. But he followed them anyway. And when they walked off Station Omega 9 and onto the, he felt the cold finally begin to fade. There was not a large ship. It was an old cargo hauler that Captain had bought 15 years ago with money borrowed from 3 different banks. The hull was patched in a dozen places. The engines made sounds that worried everyone. The water recycler broke down every few months. But to Keeper, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The crew quarters were small but warm. The mess hall smelled like cooking food instead of machine oil. There were pictures on the walls, images of places and people that the crew cared about. There was laughter. There was music. There were conversations that had nothing to do with work or schedules or efficiency. Keeper did not know how to exist in this world. For the first 3 days, he stood in corners. He did not sit unless someone told him to. He did not eat unless someone put food in front of him. He waited for orders that never came. He flinched whenever someone raised their voice, expecting punishment that never arrived. The crew noticed. They were confused at first, then concerned, then determined to fix it. Was the first to reach out. The engineer was a small woman with short hair and grease-stained hands. She found Keeper standing in the cargo bay on the 3rd night, staring at nothing. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "I do not require much sleep," Keeper said. "That's not what I asked. Can't or don't want to." Keeper did not answer. Walked closer and looked at his crushed arm. She reached out and touched it gently, examining the damage. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Always." "They told you it couldn't be fixed, right? The authority doctors." "They said repair cost exceeds unit value." Made a sound of disgust. "That's garbage. I've seen the damage. It's bad, but it's not impossible. The bones are crushed, but the nerve connections are still there. The muscle tissue is damaged, but not dead." She looked up at him with fierce eyes. "I can fix this. It'll take time and parts, but I can do it." Keeper stared at her. "Why would you waste resources on me?" "Because you're crew now, and I don't leave my crew broken if I can help it." She worked on his arm for 3 weeks. Every port they stopped at, she scavenged parts. She traded favors. She spent her own money when she had to. She rebuilt his arm piece by piece, using human technology, alien components, and pure stubbornness. The day she finished, Keeper flexed his new fingers for the first time. The arm was not pretty. It was a patchwork of metal and synthetic muscle with mismatched plating and visible seams. But it worked. For the first time in months, he could move all 5 fingers. He could lift things. He could feel pressure and temperature. "Thank you," he said. The words felt strange in his mouth. He had never said them before. "Smile, don't thank me yet. You're helping me with engine repairs now. Fair warning, it's dirty work." He helped her. He learned the ship's systems. He discovered that he liked mechanical work, that there was satisfaction in fixing things instead of just moving them. Taught him to use tools. She taught him to read technical diagrams. She treated him like a student, then like a colleague, then like a friend. The others followed her example. Han was the ship's medic. She was older than most of the crew, with hair and kind eyes. She found Keeper one day rubbing his joints, trying to hide the pain that had been his constant companion for years. "Come with me," she said. In the medical bay, she examined him properly. Not like the authority doctors who had looked at him for 30 seconds and declared him worthless. Took hours. She scanned every part of his body. She asked questions about his pain, his sleep, his history. "You've been hurting for a long time," she said finally. "Chronic inflammation in most of your joints, nerve damage in your spine, old fractures that never healed right." She shook her head. "No one ever treated any of this. Workers do not receive treatment for non-critical injuries." "Well, you're not a worker anymore, you're a patient." She prepared several injections. "This won't fix everything, but it should help. We'll do regular treatments from now on, and you're going to tell me when something hurts. That's an order." For the first time in decades, the constant ache in his body began to fade. Park was the navigator. He was young and smart and loved playing a human board game called Go. He taught Keeper the rules, expecting an easy victory. Instead, Keeper won 3 games in a row. "Your probability calculations are terrifying," said, staring at the board. "This is amazing. You're a natural." "I am designed for data processing," Keeper said. No, this isn't just processing. This is strategy. This is creativity. You're not just calculating moves, you're thinking ahead, you're planning." Grinned at him. "Play me again. I want to learn how you do it." They played every evening. Lost more often than he won, but he never seemed upset about it. He seemed happy, like beating him was somehow a gift. Keeper did not understand this. In his old life, failing was punished. Supervisors did not thank you for showing them their weaknesses, but was different. All the humans were different. And then there was. The child had appointed herself his personal guide to humanity. She followed him everywhere. She asked endless questions. She explained things that no one else thought to explain. "This is called a birthday," she said one day, showing him a picture of herself with a cake. "Humans celebrate the day they were born. Everyone sings and you get presents." "Why?" Keeper asked. "Because being alive is good. Because another year means you survived, and that's worth celebrating." She looked at him with serious eyes. "When were you born?" "I was not born. I was decanted from a growth tank. The date was not recorded." Was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. "Okay, then your birthday is the day you came on the ship. That's the day you started really living. We'll have a party." She threw him a party. The whole crew came. There was a cake that had made from their limited supplies. There were small gifts, things the crew had put together from spare parts and personal items. There was singing, off-key and enthusiastic. Keeper stood in the middle of it all, holding a small carved figure that had made for him. It was supposed to be him, she said. The carving looked nothing like him. It was rough and lopsided and clearly made by a child's hands. It was the most valuable thing he had ever owned. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Keeper sat alone in the mess hall. He looked at the carved figure. He thought about everything that had happened in the last 2 months. The repairs to his arm, the treatment for his pain, the games, the meals, the conversations. He thought about his hand, reaching through an energy barrier. He thought about a small voice saying, "Your family now." Something wet fell on his hand. He touched his face and found that it was coming from his eyes. He had seen other species do this. He knew what it was called. He was crying. For the first time in 47 cycles, Unit KV7821 was crying because he was happy. 15 months passed. They traveled from port to port, carrying cargo and picking up contracts. Keeper became part of the crew in ways he never imagined possible. He helped with engine repairs. He played Go with every evening. He learned to cook simple meals under supervision. He told stories about the places he had seen, and she told him stories about Earth, a planet he had never visited. He learned what it meant to belong. But he also learned that the galaxy had not changed. The authority still existed. Workers were still treated as property. Disposal stations still orbited dying stars, waiting for the broken and the unwanted. He tried not to think about it. He tried to focus on his new life, his new family, his new purpose. But sometimes, late at night, he remembered the cold of Cell Block 7. He remembered the cracked viewport and the red light. He remembered waiting to die. And he remembered that thousands of others were still waiting. Port Vilas was a major trading hub, one of the largest in the sector. They docked there for a week of repairs and resupply. Captain gave the crew shore leave, and everyone scattered into the station's massive market district. Keeper went with and her father. He was still getting used to crowds. The noise and movement made his processors work overtime, tracking potential threats, calculating escape routes, preparing for violence that never came. But held his hand and pulled him through the chaos, pointing at shops and stalls and strange alien foods. "Look," she said, dragging him toward a display of mechanical toys. "These are so cool. Can we get one, please?" Laughed and negotiated with the vendor. Keeper stood behind them, scanning the crowd out of habit. His rebuilt arm hummed quietly as he flexed his fingers. That was when he saw them. 12 walked through the market in a line. They were chained together at the wrists. Their heads were down. Their eyes were empty. Behind them, 2 authority officers walked with electric prods, shouting orders. Keeper stopped breathing. "Move faster," one of the officers yelled, jabbing a who had stumbled. "Auction starts in 20 minutes. Get them cleaned up." The line passed close to where Keeper stood. He saw their faces clearly. Most of them were older, worn down by decades of labor. But one of them was young, barely mature, with the same blue skin and the same tired eyes that Keeper remembered seeing in his own reflection. The young one looked up. Their eyes met. Keeper saw recognition, not of him specifically, but of what he was, a who was not chained, a who was standing freely in a market holding a child's hand, a who had somehow escaped. The young one's expression did not change. There was no hope there. She had already learned not to hope. The line moved on. The authority officers herded them toward an auction block at the center of the market. A crowd was gathering. Buyers were examining the merchandise. Tugged at Keeper's hand. "What's wrong? You look scared." He looked down at her. Her eyes were wide with concern. Behind her had finished buying the toy and was turning to rejoin them. "Those people," Keeper said, his voice was rough, "they are like me." Looked at the auction block. She saw the chains. She saw the officers with their prods. She saw the young one standing at the end of the line, waiting to be sold. I said. Her voice had changed. It was the same voice she had used on Station Omega 9, the voice that refused to accept wrong things. Walked over, he looked at the auction block. His expression darkened. "I see," he said quietly. "We have to help them," said. "Sweetheart, there are 12 of them. We don't have the money for 12. We don't have room on the ship for 12. Then we call people who can help. You always say humans help each other. Why can't we help them too?" Opened his mouth to explain why it was complicated, why they couldn't save everyone, why sometimes the galaxy was cruel and there was nothing you could do about it. But Keeper spoke first. "Captain," he said, "I would like to do something with your permission." Looked at him. "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking that someone should tell the truth about what the authority does, about Station Omega 9, about what disposal really means." He paused. His rebuilt hand was shaking. "I am thinking that I was silent for 47 cycles, and silence helps no one." The auction was beginning. The first was being led onto the platform. Buyers were calling out prices. Keeper walked toward the crowd, tried to follow but held her back. "Let him go," said quietly. "He needs to do this." Keeper pushed through the crowd until he reached the front. The auctioneer, a fat merchant species with too many eyes, was describing the first's work history. Strength ratings, efficiency scores, expected remaining service life. "Stop," Keeper said. His voice was loud, louder than he expected. The crowd went quiet. The auctioneer turned to look at him with irritation. "Who are you? This is a licensed auction. Remove yourself." "No." Keeper stepped onto the platform. The authority officers moved toward him, but something in his expression made them hesitate. "I am Unit KV7821. 15 months ago, I was scheduled for disposal on Station Omega 9. I was declared irrecoverable. I was marked for termination. A human child held my hand and refused to let go." The crowd was staring at him now. Humans, aliens, all kinds of species mixed together. Some looked confused, some looked angry, some looked curious. "You do not know what happens on Station Omega 9, Keeper continued. "The authority does not tell you. They call it decommissioning. They call it disposal. But what they mean is murder. Thousands of workers, waiting in cells, sedated and silent, waiting to die because someone decided they had no value." He lifted his rebuilt arm. The patchwork metal caught the light. This arm was crushed in an accident. An authority doctor looked at it for less than 1 minute and said I was not worth repairing. He said my life was worth less than the cost of fixing me. Keeper looked at the crowd. A human engineer spent 3 weeks rebuilding this arm from scrap. She did not ask if I was worth the cost. She simply helped because helping was right. The young in the line was watching him now. Her empty expression had changed. There was something there that might have been shock or might have been hope. "You are buying people today," Keeper said to the crowd. "You are buying workers and laborers and servants, but they are not objects. They are not tools. They have thoughts and feelings and pain just like you. They can learn and grow and change just like you." He pointed at the young. "She is someone's daughter. She has never known kindness. She has never known family. She has been taught that her only value is her labor, and when her labor ends, she will end too." He paused. The crowd was completely silent. "I was taught the same thing," Keeper said. "A human child showed me it was a lie. A human child saw my worth when an entire galactic bureaucracy did not. She said I was not garbage. She said I was a person." His voice cracked. She was right. A human woman in the crowd stepped forward. She looked at the auction block, at the chain, at Keeper standing with his rebuilt arm raised. "How much for the young one?" she asked. The auctioneer stammered. The authority officers looked uncertain. The crowd began to stir. "How much?" another human called out. Then another. Then a dozen. Within an hour, all 12 were sold to buyers who promised them freedom. Within a week, recordings of Keeper's speech had spread across 100 stations. Within a month, the name Station Omega 9 was known to every human in the sector. The authority tried to suppress it. Everything. They called Keeper a malfunction, a defective unit spreading lies. But the truth was out, and the truth, once spoken, could not be unspoken. Keeper watched from as the galaxy began to change. It was slow, it was painful, but it was happening. "You did good," said, standing beside him at the viewport. "I only told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do." Ran up and hugged Keeper's leg. She was too short to reach higher. "I'm proud of you," she said. Keeper looked down at her, at the child who had reached through an energy barrier, at the small hand that had refused to let go. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." Grinned, that's what family does. 10 years had passed since the day at Port Vilas. Keeper stood on the observation deck of the new station, watching ships come and go. The station was called Haven. It orbited a young star, bright and warm, the opposite of the dying red dwarf that had once lit his cell. The station had been built by a coalition of human governments and alien allies. Its purpose was simple: to provide sanctuary for those who had been thrown away. He was not Unit KV7821 anymore. He had a real name now, Keeper, just Keeper. He had chosen to keep it because it reminded him of where he came from and how far he had traveled. The station bustled with activity. Thousands of former laborers lived here now, learning skills, receiving medical care, discovering what it meant to be free. Mostly, but also other engineered species that the Authority had created and discarded. They came from disposal stations across the galaxy, rescued by ships that had heard Keeper's speech and decided to do something about it. They had been the first rescue ship. There were hundreds now. A door opened behind him. Footsteps approached, and a young woman came to stand beside him at the viewport. "The council meeting starts in an hour," she said. "They want you to give the opening address." Keeper looked at her. Was 17 now, tall and confident, with her father's stubborn jaw and her mother's kind eyes. She had grown up on then on Haven, watching the movement she had started spread across the stars. "I still do not understand why they want me to speak," Keeper said. "I am not a leader. I am not special. I was simply in the right place at the right time." "You're wrong about that," said. "You were brave when it mattered. You spoke the truth when everyone wanted you to be quiet. That's what makes a leader," she smiled. "Also, you're really tall and impressive looking, good for speeches." Keeper made a sound that might have been a laugh. He was still learning how to laugh properly, even after 10 years. "How is your father?" he asked. "Busy. The new trade routes are opening next month and he's negotiating with 12 different stations. He sends his love." Paused. "He's proud of you. He tells everyone about the he bought for 100 credits who changed the galaxy." "He exaggerates." "He really doesn't." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ships. A medical transport was docking at the station's main bay. It carried survivors from a disposal station that had been discovered last month, hidden in an asteroid field. 47 workers, all marked for termination, all now free. "Do you ever think about Station Omega 9? Asked quietly. Keeper was quiet for a long moment. "Yes, I think about it every day." "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes, but mostly I think about how close I came to dying there, how close I came to never knowing any of this." He gestured at the station, at the ships, at the bright star beyond the viewport. "If you had not found me, I would have been terminated 2 days later. I would never have seen Haven. I would never have known what freedom felt like." Reached out and took his hand. It was the same gesture she had made 10 years ago, reaching through an energy barrier to grab his fingers. "I'm glad I found you," she said. "I am glad too." The council meeting was held in Haven's Central Assembly Hall. Representatives from a dozen species sat in curved rows, facing a raised platform where speakers addressed the crowd. The hall was full. News services from across the galaxy were broadcasting the event. Today was the 10th anniversary of the Port Vilas speech. Today, the Galactic Commerce Authority would officially sign a treaty recognizing engineered laborers as persons with full rights. It had taken a decade of protests, negotiations, and legal battles. It had taken the testimony of thousands of survivors. It had taken the tireless work of humans and aliens who refused to accept that some people were worth less than others. But it was finally happening. Keeper walked to the platform. The crowd fell silent. Cameras focused on him from every angle. His rebuilt arm gleamed under the lights, still a patchwork of parts from a dozen different sources, still the arm that had built from scrap and stubbornness. He looked out at the assembly. He saw faces he recognized. Captain was there, haired now but still strong. Sat beside him, her hands still stained with engine grease. And the rest of the crew filled an entire row. Behind them sat hundreds of others who had joined the cause over the years. And in the front row, watched him with shining eyes. 10 years ago, Keeper began, I was declared irrecoverable. I was marked for disposal. I sat in a cell on Station Omega 9, waiting to die, and I believed that my death was correct. I believed that I had no value. I believed that the only purpose of my existence was labor, and when my body broke, my existence should end. He paused. The hall was completely silent. I was wrong, but I did not learn this on my own. I learned it because a human child crawled through a ventilation shaft and asked me why I was sad. I learned it because she held my hand and refused to let go. I learned it because her father spent 100 credits to buy something the authority said was worthless. I learned it because an engineer rebuilt my arm when everyone said it could not be fixed. I learned it because a crew of humans looked at a broken worker and saw a person instead. He looked at, she was crying, but she was also smiling. Humans have a word for what they do, Keeper said. They call it compassion, they call it empathy, they call it love. These are not just feelings, they are choices, they are actions. When a human sees someone suffering, they do not calculate the cost of helping. They do not ask if the suffering person is worth saving. They simply reach out their hand and hold on. He raised his rebuilt arm. I stand before you today because of that choice. Thousands of others stand free because humans refused to accept that our lives had no value. The authority called us defective. Humans called us family. The authority said we should be disposed of. Humans said we should be saved. He lowered his arm. Today, the treaty will be signed. Today, the law will change. But the law is just words on paper. What matters is what we do next. What matters is whether we continue to reach out our hands to those who are suffering. What matters is whether we refuse to let go. He stepped back from the platform. The hall erupted in applause. Species that had never agreed on anything before were standing together, cheering, crying, embracing each other. Met him at the edge of the platform. She threw her arms around him, not caring that cameras were watching, not caring that the galaxy could see. You did it, she whispered. We did it, he corrected. I was just the voice. You were the one who started everything. She pulled back and looked at him. I was 7. I didn't know what I was starting. That is what made it powerful. You did not calculate the consequences. You did not weigh the costs. You simply saw someone who was hurting and you refused to accept it. He touched her face gently with his rebuilt hand. That is what humans do. That is what makes you extraordinary. The signing ceremony happened an hour later. Authority officials, looking uncomfortable and resentful, added their marks to the treaty. Representatives from human governments stood witness. Survivors of disposal stations watched from screens across the galaxy. When it was done, when the treaty was official, when the law finally recognized that engineered laborers were people with rights and dignity, Keeper stood alone on the observation deck. The bright star filled the viewport with golden light. Ships came and went, carrying hope to places that had known only despair. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely, because a small hand had reached through an energy barrier and refused to let go. Footsteps approached, joined him at the viewport. What now? She asked. Keeper considered the question. For 47 cycles, his only purpose had been labor. For the last 10 years, his purpose had been fighting for freedom. Now that the fight was won, what was left? He looked at the ships. He looked at the station. He looked at the young woman who had saved his life with a simple act of compassion. Now, he said slowly, we make sure it lasts. We teach others what you taught me. We show them that every person has value, that every life is worth saving, that every hand reaching out deserves to be held. Smiled. That sounds like a lot of work. Yes, but I am good at work. He paused. and I have learned that work is better when you have family to share it with." She took his hand. Her grip was warm and strong, the same as it had been 10 years ago. "Then let's get started," she said. Together, they walked toward the future. Behind them, the bright star continued to shine, filling the observation deck with light. And somewhere in the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, people who had been told they were worthless were learning what Keeper had learned long ago. They were learning that they mattered. They were learning that they were not alone. They were learning that sometimes, all it took to change the universe was one small hand, refusing to let go.